Okay. Since there is no citizens' comments, we'll go ahead and move on to business items. Starting with Urban Deer Management, Ben Olson from Texas Parks and Wildlife is here today with us, taking the time out of his busy schedule this time of year to come out and talk to us. So I appreciate you coming out, giving a little presentation about urban deer ecology management. Thank you. Mike. There you go.
There we go. Great. It wouldn't be a talk without something going on like that. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. Happy to talk to you guys about urban deer. I kind of updated this PowerPoint a little bit, so we'll see some new information from stuff you guys have seen in the past, and have a good time. And I'll try not to go too fast. I have a tendency to talk really fast in presentations, so let me know if I'm going too fast. So getting started, it's important to kind of talk just a little bit about basics of deer ecology. And you really can't talk about the basics of anything or talk about whitetail deer without recognizing the whitetail deer is one of our greatest conservation success stories. It's hard for us to imagine today, but 100 years ago or so, deer were very scarce. They were extirpated from multiple states. Their range was greatly diminished. There was an estimate of less than 500,000 deer left in the United States. And this is through a variety of factors, including unregulated market hunting, habitat and cultural changes, and just kind of a lack of awareness of what we were doing. And so through conservation efforts, through regulated hunting, raising of fees for conservation, now we enjoy a lot of deer everywhere. Last estimates are over 30 million deer in the United States. That's a drastic change. And, you know, what else contributes to that? Well, that's a little bit about that, you know, things about deer ecology, such as they're highly reproductive. 95% of females are bred every single year, and of those 95%, on average, they're going to have about 1.5 fawns every year. Obviously, that doesn't mean there's half of a fawn, but just, you know, it balances out to be about 1.5. And so even of that, the fawns that are born, they're able to be bred, the doe fawns are able to be bred the following year. So it's a very rapid reproductive rate. Another thing that I think, you know, primarily contributes to this is they're very habitat generalists. And what I mean by that is they're widely adaptable to very different environments. You know, they cover the vast majority of the continental United States, and, you know, in a variety of places, you know, from, you know, obviously the Texas Hill Country to, you know, these more urban environments like what we've got right here in Garden Ridge. But that being said, despite being able to live in very different areas, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of those areas are good for deer. Different food source availability, different quality of food, cover, you know, things like that we'll continue talking about on the next slide also is important. So we spend a lot of time talking about what is deer habitat. And it's important to know what we're talking about when we talk about habitat, and that's the combination of the ecosystem that makes up for food, water, cover, and the arrangement of the space of those things. So with regarding to deer, deer have two primary food sources, and those come from forbs and browse. And forbs we're talking about broadleaf or wildflowers, browse those woody plants. And so that's why, you know, even in these urban areas you see deer, a lot of times they're eating people's flowers, shrubs that they've got, because those are the primary food sources. Those are the things that are going to have high protein content, as opposed to some of the stuff that they don't select for. You know, something that I find that a lot of folks don't realize is deer can't digest grass. They will very rarely eat some of the just fresh emerging grass, but they're not going to be out kind of like a cow eating up grass in the field. They're picking out, in those cases, little wildflowers that they're seeing in the area. Obviously, all animals need some kind of water source. Cover is incredibly important, especially this time of year where it's really hot outside. So we got to have that protection from predators, but also to get away from the heat and find a place to cool off in the middle of the day. And that's through your dense brush. Next thing that's really important is fawns have to have a place to hide from predators. So those are your tall grassy areas typically. And then adequate space that's going to cover all of those things. It's all things we got to think about when we're going in here. So now let's talk about population growth and things that impacts a population over time. So there's really 4 things that impact a population: births, immigration into an area is how the population can increase, or it can decrease through obviously deaths or immigration out of an area. And it is kind of how the mathematics of those work, those rates, results in whether or not you see a population grow or stay the same or decrease. And so I've got this curve up here on the graph. It shows population size over time. And under ideal, perfect situation where resources are not limited, a wildlife population is going to exponentially increase over time. And it'll increase at a ever-growing rate, or grow at an ever-increasing rate. But that doesn't happen very often. Very rarely it happens, and in a couple of cases that you do see it, it's for a very short period of time because resources are always limiting in some way, whether that is through your ecological resources, such as those habitat components we talked about: food, water, cover, space. But the other thing that influences this is predation. What's the predator population like? Disease spread. Then there's human factors such as car wildlife collisions, landscape damage. So this all adds up to what's called carrying capacity, which is kind of that limit where the area or the habitat cannot sustain any more individuals without a cost. It is important to add that. So carrying capacity is not something we can just go out and measure. It's something that we have to kind of look at clues, because it's not a set number there. We use these clues to kind of look at, how does the amount of browse species look like for deer, because they're going to select for their favorite foods, much like we do. And so, with that being said, a population can jump above that carrying capacity, but the result or the cost of that is degradation to that area. And that could be through loss of plant life, through animal life, and basically loss of overall ecosystem health. And so it's important for us to kind of be aware of that, especially in these areas where it can be limited based on size and availability. So talking a little bit more, I kind of jumped ahead of myself, of the habitat degradation. So like I said, if the number of individuals is past what can be sustained, we start seeing loss of plant life, loss of animal diversity, because it's not just deer that rely on a lot of these plant species. It's other animals, wildlife species do as well. And then that obviously impacts your overall ecosystem health. The picture up here shows a browse line of where deer have ate up some of these oak trees up to the point where they can reach. And so you can very clearly see a lack of plant life from the ground to about 5-6 foot tall in the background. And that's talked a lot in forest ecosystems, where we should have some underlying vegetation growing. So that's always one clear sign that we can observe that plant life is not able to keep up with the amount of browsing that's being done. So indications of too many deer. Could have a lot of deer vehicle collisions, could have a lot of landscape damage. You could see increases in the number of sick deer being seen. How many people have seen a deer that looked like the one on the bottom picture looked awful thin. Declining herd health kind of is added to that. Habitat signs, like we talked about, the browse line, biological signs that kind of goes in with the sick deer. You can kind of see, in other areas we can kind of look at weights of deer and age of deer. Have there been any incidents of injury to humans or pets, especially during the rut or the breeding season that we're getting ready to enter? Very rarely happens, but it has happened. We take this information and we kind of gives us indications that maybe we do have a high population in an area. So talking about carrying capacity, talking about lack of food sources, we got to have the talk about supplemental food for deer and how it's not recommended. And the reason is, I think this is a classic example of we have good intentions to do something. We think we're going to do something that's going to be really helpful, but it comes at a cost. It's doing a lot more harm than any positive benefits. And a lot of that is, so we see a lot of times people will feed deer corn, and corn is junk food for deer. It's got really high fat, it's got very low protein content, so it fills up their stomachs, but they're not actually getting the nutrients that they need. It's kind of a similar thing with ducks and geese to bread. I'm always talking to folks to not be feeding ducks and geese bread because it's the same story. It's not good for them. And so the other thing with supplemental feed is it habituates deer to people. It makes it to where they're comfortable being approached or approaching people, and that adds to further risk of potential injury. So the other things to mention is it concentrates deer in a very small area, so that could lead to landscape damage. Research has shown that despite even large supplemental feeding regimes, they're still eating the preferred plant life that they want. So when you've got more deer in an area, they're eating more of those plant species. Greater disease transmission, diseases such as chronic wasting disease, different parasites that we see fairly common in the area, different things like that lead up. And then, of course, vehicle collisions can increase too, as we've got deer trying to get to a specific site for food. So talking about urban deer management, what can really be controlled? What are we trying to work with here? And this goes back to one of the first few slides talking about population growth. There's 4 things: births, deaths, ingress, or egress. And how do we alter those or alter that equation so that we reach whatever our goal is, whether it's to maintain, increase, decrease a population. So I want to take the next couple slides to talk about something that reflects each of these programs. So obviously controlling birth, something we spend a lot of time talking about through the fertility control of deer. Just kind of a quick informative slide on this with some recent research that's been posted here pretty recently. But we got to start with, there's no legal method for controlling birth of deer in Texas, and any kind of change to that would require legislative action. There is potential for research, but that's a whole nother discussion. It's been extensively researched and studied over the last 5 decades with pretty limited success. One thing that's always talked about is the contraception drugs that are out there, and they've been around for a while, and they've been studied for just about those same 5 decades with very little advancement or change. It's extremely expensive. We're talking $1,000 to $2,000 per deer that could potentially need to be treated. Some of the common drugs that are used have to be treated every so many years. for the same deer. And so then you're adding in a whole new element of trying to catch an animal a second time, and that is extremely difficult and for any animal species. And then you're looking at a need for 85% or more of deer that need to be treated by this. So there's all these compounding factors that just makes what's available right now just not viable. There has been the recent research that's kind of been out here recently has shown some effectiveness with surgical sterilization using ovariectomies, where some researchers have been able to document 45% population decline after 4 years after treating 93% of a doe population of this. Still very expensive, $1,200 a deer, but they have shown that it is possible for some population reduction in very specific areas and specific circumstances, and then you need the right trained. So just for numbers, I threw on here looking at last year's survey estimates. To even think about the surgical sterilization, Garden Ridge to reach that 85% deer would need to treat over 500 deer for that at $1,200 each is kind of an example of the costs we're talking about here. Next thing, controlling ingress, moving into a population. We've got to ask questions such as, do you really need to control that? What size area you're dealing with? What's the population density adjacent? Are deer really moving into the area or not? And then, really the only thing you can really do is some type of high fencing. Again, high cost, very high cost. Controlling egress, moving out of the population. TPWD has a permit, that trap, transport, and translocate permit. That can be used and has been used in many communities. There are some pretty substantial problems with that. Availability of research sites. Deer are so common nowadays that it's pretty hard to find an area that needs more deer. Additionally, how many can you catch? Will it have a full impact? There's a cost factor, a risk of mortality, and then a risk of disease transmission. Chronic wasting disease has been popping up more in the state of Texas this last year. We've had several new detections, and that trap, transport, and translocate permit is being discussed at an upcoming commission meeting about potentially suspending it going forward due to risk of chronic wasting disease spread. So that might not be a viable option going forward here pretty quick, but we'll find out more here in the next month and a half on that. And then, finally, increasing mortality or deaths. Hunting's regularly used in a lot of areas, not possible in most cities. Trained sharpshooting, that's worked in some other places outside of the state of Texas. It's not legal in Texas right now. So that leads us to the trap, transport, and process permit that's used where deer are trapped and humanely dispatched to have meat donated to those that need it most, whether it be the local pantry or homeless shelters or whatnot. So those are the kind of the main factors. And so when considering these, we got to talk about what are the steps to success or steps that can be done in these types of communities. What's the process we can do? Problem definition, decision-making, implementation, evaluation, and adaptation. City of Garden Ridge, you guys have a wildlife management plan, so you've been through much of this process already. And so, defining the problem, we're asking, these general questions: what kinds of deer-related problems are occurring? Where and when are these problems occurring? How severe are the problems? Are they getting worse? Are they staying the same? Things that are impact. And then, we're going to decision making when we're coming up with to identify goals. And these goals, I always stress to folks, they've got to be realistic and achievable. And so I've got up here an example of, supporting, our goal could be to support a community that is well educated on how to live with deer while reducing deer human human deer conflicts. Okay, well, how are we going to do that? And so that's where, having clear and concise objectives is really effective. And there's this acronym SMART that I think is really great for explaining, how to come up with a good set of objectives. And that's where we're talking about, they got to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and then time related. So a good example related to the goal I have on the screen would be to reduce the number of deer vehicle collisions to a certain amount per year by X year. And then once we've got that, jumping ahead, key points for goals and objectives, they've got to reflect a desired outcome in the future, and that is specific, and these objectives have to be specific and measurable to achieve that goal or those goals. Goals and objectives should be identified prior to deciding any type of actions. We got to know what we're getting into, and then again, need to be realistic and achievable. So actions, how are you going to meet those objectives? Got to be able to answer questions to, how is this action going to actually contribute to the goal or the objectives? How are you going to carry out? Who's going to carry out these actions, and then where? So you've got your plan, implementation, carry out these actions to reach your goals and objectives. And then what I think is the most important part is going back and evaluating and potentially adapting your plan. So you've got to have a pre-planned evaluation time set to assess, are you meeting your goals or objectives? Has something changed? Does something need to change? And then going in and making any kind of changes after that. This process will never end. Deer aren't going to just go away. So the problem's always going to be there in some capacity. So we've always got to be adaptable and change as needed. So something I've been toting a lot here lately to folks that I talk to, a really good resource for folks that want to learn anything about what some other communities have done for urban deer management is it's called the Community Deer Advisor, deeradvisor.org. It's a really nice and simple website to remember. It's a joint program made by Cornell University and the Nature Conservancy. And on the website, they have a ton of reading material of what other folks have done, what's been successful for one community, maybe not another one, but there's a huge amount of resource out there. And then they've even got this free online course that kind of summarizes all of it into one easy little course to go through. So starting to segue into talking about surveys real quick. This is just a graph I shared last year, and I realized my slide cut off my years, but talking about the deer density over time. We discussed last year that there was an increase in the estimate of the deer population, about 20% increase from 2019. And so that's what that graph is showing right there. And then that red dashed line, it was the goal number that is in the Garden Ridge Management Plan as a goal. And so briefly talking about surveys, it is survey season. And so, it's technically called a modified spotlight survey done shortly before sunset. The goal is to get 3 of them done, about 5 days apart, give or take. And then at the bottom, I have the days that I currently have open to assist. And that's what I got.
Thank you, Ben. That was great. I think some new interesting information.
And I can go back and wait.
No.
Your guys' schedule.
I just want to open up for questions really quick, see if we have any questions for Mr. Olson.
Last year's snow and freezing did not affect the white-tailed deer population at all, did it?
Been the general finding is that I only know of one case of any of really throughout the whole Edwards Plateau of a white-tailed deer dying during that time frame. I'm sure there are more, but that was the only one that I came across, and then that my colleagues came across too. It was the exotic wildlife that took substantial loss
Right.
from that. Axis seems to be roughly around 25% across the board, so, which is, pretty
That's pretty much
substantial.
what I had heard, the axis deer is what took the hit in the hill country.
What's that?
The axis deer is what took the biggest hit during the,
Axis, Black Book took a pretty
Yeah.
decent hit too, but yeah, it was mostly just the exotic species.
yeah.
It's been kind of interesting. We're still kind of learning some things. We've just wrapped up our dove banding and survey season. We were finding, some signs of the winter storm on doves, whether that be loss of toes from frostbite and stuff like that. So stuff you wouldn't think, but we're still learning.
Any other questions? No? Okay. So your availability, so let's really quickly talk through that.
Yeah, so that's just the next 3 weeks that I just threw on there.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We usually do this. I mean, this is about the time we do this. So I guess my question, we don't have a full panel here, but is there any, I guess we need to do, well, we're looking at 3, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you can have, I guess, let me just ask, any conditions around people riding in your vehicle, outside of your vehicle, like COVID? I'm just making sure.
No, not at the time, no.
Okay.
We ideally would want no less than myself driving and then 2 observers at a minimum.
Okay.
We could probably sustain.
No, that's
A
fine.
couple
2's
more,
fine.
but, yeah.
I think 2 people on the commission need to show up
One on
and
each side.
assist
Yep.
per our charter. So that's fine. I guess, I think the ask here, I'm not going to put you on the spot today to ask you what time frame, like what days work for y'all. But maybe we can, if you can put together your availability, email it to Kat like tomorrow or the next day and say, these are the days that I'm available. Does that
Yeah,
give you enough
yep.
time? If we get back to you in the next couple of days, is that okay?
Yeah, that's good. I'll keep those days open. Like I said, those are the days I have open right now, and I'll keep them open the next couple days. Just the evenings, and then we can work with what's best for everybody there.
Okay.
And then we'll plan. The plan is to get started, an hour before actual sunset time. So that'll be the plan. And last year we met up just right outside the parking lot here, and I think that worked really well. So
Okay.
we can just plan on doing that.
We'll just get everybody scheduled, and if any city council folks want to join, Lisa, if you want to pass the word along, if we can't get, I think they're more than welcome to join along, but we'll just see what everybody's availability looks like. I would say we're going to have some spots that we need filled. Okay.
Have you changed the seating in your truck?
I have a completely new truck, so yes.
It's not as high as it
It's
was.
not near as high anymore.
Okay.
That was one of my biggest things.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Is there any, I guess, and this is just not necessarily a personal question, but is Texas Parks and Wildlife looking at any deregulation to assist with overpopulation of white-tailed deer?
I know there are a few conversations going on about certain topics. I don't know where they are. Like the sharpshooting thing is, I know one thing being discussed. There's other discussions. I don't know that they'd be applicable to Garden Ridge with our managed lands deer program for some other urban areas about potential where they could have access to regular deer hunting permits for harvesting in right situations. So,
Yeah, I think y'all done a good job of regulating it to the point where it is now that
Yeah.
we're at 10 million plus deer in Texas, probably, right? Something like that?
I don't know what the latest number was, but it's
But a
pretty good.
lot.
Yeah.
We have regulated ourselves into a situation that's difficult on many many fronts, right?
Yep.
So,
Yeah, there's always discussions, and if you guys ever come up with something you want to ask about or something like that, anytime, feel free to reach out. I can talk to our folks that are really in charge of all of that and have a lot of the big, heavy discussions with that, so.
yeah, and just anecdotal feedback, I think the issue for us is we're in a corner now, right? We have effectively no place to trap these deer. We have no way out of the situation that we're currently in with the number of deer that we have in our current population. So there is no path forward for us, right, without some changes to how Texas Parks and Wildlife will allow us to manage these deer, right? So it's currently where we sit, right? Our hands are tied behind our back with, we can't do anything. There is no legal method for us to be able to reduce the population, right?
Yeah.
Or increase mortality, as you put it in this slide deck. Or even promote egress, right? So there is nothing for us to do. Yeah. So I think that's the hard part that we're in. Obviously, we want to track our population so that we understand what we're dealing with, but at the same time, there is no lever for us to pull.
Yeah.
So, to even consider, frankly, right? So I think that's my just feedback in general.
Yeah, it's a challenge, and it's a challenge. It's a common challenge for a lot of places. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I think those regulations that were put in place in the, 50s, 60s, 70s that made sense then, and our population density as just human beings was a lot different, right? Now that we're 50, 80 years past those, our potential for improvement is not really all that's there, right? With the 10-acre minimums and that type of thing, that's what I'm really getting at.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying people need to hunt on 3/4 an acre here in Garden Ridge. I'm saying
Well, and
There is no-
the 10 acres that's a Comal County rule. That's not a state rule.
no, it's not.
Yeah, it's a Comal County. It's
About-
different county by county. There are some counties where it's a lot lower than that.
Really? Didn't know
Yeah,
that.
that's my
interesting.
understanding. I'm not aware
I thought
of
that
the
was
state rule.
I thought
Yeah.
that was a statewide.
I'm not aware of a state law.
Regulation.
I've seen the county
So I
statute.
guess, good point. Who comes up with county rules and regulations for TPNW?
For TPWD?
Yeah.
We don't come up with other than that general deer hunting laws and rules like that. We don't come up with statutes of it has to be X number of acres to be able to go hunting on this property, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
So I guess if you wanted to go change your 10 acres, let's just say, you wanted to go change that particular rule, who would you reach out to? You'd reach out
I
to Texas Parks and Wildlife or county commissioners?
I would start talking to your county commissioners.
Okay, interesting. Okay,
I could be off on
No,
that.
no,
but
and I
that's
could-
my
I-
understanding, yeah.
I have not asked that question, so I don't know the answer, so.
Yeah, no,
I may be pointing.
I haven't looked into that question myself, so yeah. And I'll do a couple, I know a couple people that might have a better answer than that. I'll reach out to them
Okay.
on that.
I've always seen it in the Texas Parks and Wildlife handbook that I get every year, so I just assume, I think that it comes from you guys, right?
Yeah.
And that may be just off base. Okay. Great. I think we'll get back to you on our availability to match up with yours. I appreciate you obviously coming out, giving us this presentation, and then, taking the time out of your 3 nights here in the next 3 weeks to help us with this survey. I think it adds a bit of credibility for your perspective. It adds some credibility that our accounts are accurate,
Yeah.
and that there's an expert riding along doing it with us. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. Any final questions?
No.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Ben.
you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. moving on to 5B, approvals of minutes for June 21st, 2020.
I move that the minutes be approved as they were distributed.
Okay, I've got a motion to approve. Yep, that's the word I'm looking for. For the minutes of June 21st, I've got a second. All in favor? Let me turn the mic. Mike, get your mic. There you go. Now say aye.
Aye.
Ah, good. All right. That passes unanimously. We'll go ahead and move on to 5C, discussions, wildlife and wildlife incidents. Anything you want to discuss here about animal services or police department? I don't think the number, just frankly, the numbers don't look too bad. They look pretty good, actually. I think with the amount of deer that we have, I think it actually looks pretty good, amount of carcasses. I'm not saying all those are deer vehicle collisions, I'm just saying that's not really that bad of a number. I will say, I think what's helped a bit is the speed limit reduction, speed on 3009 from city limits to here may have helped a little bit as well. I think it gives that extra, I always speed, so what is it, what's the actual, is it 10 miles an hour different or is it 5? I can't not remember. It's 5, okay. May give people a little extra time, so, to stop or avoid, I guess. Any questions, comments, concerns around that? Okay. Moving on to, then we'll move to meetings and updates. Items applicable to the Wildlife Management Advisory discussed at July and August city council meetings. I was not at the last city council meeting due to an illness, but I'm back now. So I will be at the next one. Anything, Lisa, that we need to discuss here? I don't think there was anything really.
I don't think there was anything.
Okay. All right. Items applicable to Wildlife Management Advisory Commission and Parks and Committee monthly meetings. There was an update here from Shannon. I don't know that I need to read it. Y'all have it here in front of you. It's up, do I need to read that or not? I assume I do.
No, that, I only printed it out for you to
Okay,
read.
sorry. I lied.
And
Y'all don't
it's
have it.
actually for her commissioner's project, not for the Parks Committee, I believe. Well,
Okay.
that's what,
It's a little bit overlap, yes, agreed. Okay, fair enough. I'll get to that in a second then. I don't think there's an update for that. Moving on, we'll go to the next one, where it is applicable. Updated commissioner activities and projects. So Shannon had sent in something, she's unable to attend today, but she did give an update. She met with Jan from Combine Master Gardeners and Cynthia Segovia, who was on this commission previously, about the Monarch pledge. I guess they met on June 28th. They went through a checklist of some action items, and what we kind of wanted to focus on. I think at the end of the day, they're looking for some funding for the Meadow, not the garden, not to be confused with the garden up here, but the Meadow at Paul Davis Park. So I don't know what, if anything, we have left as far as budget goes, but it may be something that we would like to do if we have budget for some seeds and keeping that thing going. I know that it's, for those who don't know, it is a wildflower meadow that's kind of been kept up for a number of different animals, birds, insects, all that good stuff. So that's the reason we did it. It was kind of Cynthia's passion project, which she kind of took on fully, and has still been doing it kind of on a volunteer basis. So, sorry, Cynthia, not Cindy. I don't know why I said Cindy. So I think that's what we're looking for. I don't know if that's possible to give funding for some feed or some seed, excuse me. But I don't know where we stand on that.
I don't know how much money is left in the current
budget.
Okay.
I know there's some money proposed for the upcoming budget. Y'all don't meet again until October, so I don't know how much money or exactly what they're proposing to ask for.
I don't know the exact amount either. However, it was traditionally, I think, $200, $250 for that type of feed, that type of seed. I don't like saying feed. But I don't know what's left. So is that something that we need to come to consensus on and say yes to, or is that just something that we can allocate without that? That the city administration can just say yes to?
I would prefer at least a consensus from the commission.
Okay.
As if that's what y'all are desiring to purchase is some seed. I would prefer consensus.
Okay. Okay. So the ask is they asked from Cynthia, and I think not just the Parks Committee, but some other folks as well, to allocate some funding for some seed to reseed that meadow. So obviously up to y'all, if that's something that you think is important. We thought it was important a couple of years ago and last year, but it's really your call. So you can say yay or nay, and you can give me reasons why, and we'll go on.
Well, since we're not continuing with trapping, I don't see any reason why we couldn't. There should be some budget left from the trapping,
There-
right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
But I don't know exactly how much it is.
Right.
And I
If
don't
we-
know how much seed they're wanting to purchase.
Okay.
That's good.
So I think, I mean, you can put out a number too if you want to. Like if you say, hey, this is what I think is applicable. I think the last time we did it was 250, but
But it looks like,
it's really a guess. Oh, it's right here. It's 212. My apology.
I don't see any reason why we
Thanks,
couldn't
Kat.
support that.
I wasn't even paying attention to it.
I don't see any reason why we couldn't support that.
Okay.
I concur that it's a good project, that if it brings in the butterflies and we can keep another pollinators in the area, let's do that.
Okay. I think it's part of the Monarch pledge as well. I don't know
Yes.
that that's the case, but I think that's
think
what
it
we had
is.
decided as well. Okay,
I
it
think
is.
it is.
Okay. So it's part of the Monarch pledge. I don't know what I have not talked to the new mayor, but I don't know what his Monarch pledge has changed or not, but we'll stick with the previous administration, I guess, and what they had to say. So, you good with that?
I concur.
Okay. So we'll just make a general consensus that we'd like to do that if we have the funds available.
Yep.
And it'd be roughly the same amount. At £1 per $200.
I'm sorry?
I guess it's £1 of deer-resistant
Okay,
seed,
so,
so.
okay.
Maybe it's 4 pounds, I'm sorry, I'm lying, 4 pounds. I was thought, man, $196 a pound, I need to get in that business.
Yes.
Okay. All right, any other discussions on that one? Okay. Future education training sessions, Grapevine. I guess we could put something, Kat, that we're gonna be doing a survey, I know it's gonna be late. No, I'm not saying we should do it for this month, I'm saying maybe next month that we completed the surveys and we'll give the dates, is that fair?
I'm sorry, you want to put something in the October grapevine that you completed deer counts and you want to release the numbers, or?
We can, we might.
I mean, are you just wanting like a little paragraph that says the commission met and?
We
they-
might have numbers. I guess can we just see how it goes? That's the only thing I would say that we would add to the grapevine is, here are the new population counts for the October one. If you can just hold off or just let us know before you send it out, like a week, and then we could just make sure we have those numbers in there.
Okay.
Is
yeah,
that fair?
Yes, if we have the numbers in time, we can make something work.
Okay, my concern was there should be something about we're evaluating the results to see, whether or not it's optimal for the deer population. Because people could be asking questions, well, is this too many, is too few, or just what?
Hard to, like, that's still a subjective answer to that question, right? So there is no, I think for us to come to that conclusion has always been very difficult, right? For us to say something's like, this is too many or this is not enough. We have a management plan. Against our management plan, it would be X. Yes, okay,
Yep.
fair enough. All right. All right, any other discussions about future education training sessions? I don't think we have anything just for October for a training session. So if there's something that you all feel passionate about, that you want to talk about, or you want to bring somebody in to talk about, please do so and let Kat know. Good? All right. I don't think we need to make any changes to the deer management program, feral hog management program, so I think we can move on to number 5, which is basically discussing our expiring terms. Mine, Mr. Limmers, Mr. Kniper, and Mr. Sullivan, who's not attending today, not here. So, with 4 of us, and I guess 3 of us being a part of the expiring terms, should we just move forward with this just as per normal, like on a per person basis?
Yes.
I assume it doesn't matter, but I just wanted to ask the question.
If all of the commissioners are in agreement to wish for reappointment, it can be one whole motion.
Okay, perfect. All right, so, that said, does anybody not wanting to be a part of this and doesn't want to renew their expiring term?
I do not.
Mr. Kniper does not, okay. So he's out. Mr. Sullivan, I don't know, Kat, have you heard anything from Mr. Sullivan? No, you have not, okay. Well, no, I'll take it back. Mr. Limmers, are you wanting to continue on?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I will continue on as well. So, it's really, I think, contingent upon Mr. Sullivan, but we will assume he is moving forward until otherwise heard from him. So, I need a motion to continue on with myself, Mr. Limmers, and Mr. Sullivan.
I'd like to make a motion to extend your terms or reinstate your terms for Mr. Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Lemers, and and I cannot pronounce your name.
Krasinski, it's okay.
Krasinski.
All right, I've got a motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
Oh, Mike? No?
Nope.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. We will take that to City Council to extend those terms. Okay. I think we can move on to future agenda items. Anybody want to add anything for future agenda items? Going once, going twice? Nope, okay. So the next Wildlife Management Advisory Commission will meet October 18th at 6 p.m. at City Hall, and hopefully we'll have some numbers for you. I don't think there's any citizens that want to make comments. Ladies, would you like to come up and make a comment? No? Are you sure? Okay. That concludes our meeting for today at 6:50. Thank you.
Really? 1850, good.
Still Kat's pen, let me give that back to her.